Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother Asar Imhotep with the Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. And today we are continuing our conversation on the Cyena-Ntu religious foundations. Cyena-Ntu being the name of the language family, formerly called Negro-Egyptian by Teofilo Obenga and Jean-Claude Mbongi. And so we're going to deal with the religious foundations of the language family. And in this episode, we're going to show the relationship between the concept of nkisi among the Congo speakers of Central Africa and the Netcher and Netcheru out of ancient Kemet. So more of that when we return in just a moment. Welcome back. Again, today's topic is a continuation in our series of Cyena-Ntu religious foundations. And today we're going to discuss the relationship between the Congo concept of nkisi and the ancient Kemetic or ancient Egyptian concept of Netcher. And so, as you can see from the graphic on the screen, that I equate nkisi with Netcher, and they are one and the same. And so we will see how an understanding of either one of these concepts help to illuminate the other. So, as always, I like to utilize Bantu languages and cultures to illuminate certain concepts that are found in ancient Kemet and to show the relationship and the continuity in thought in practice between ancient Kemet and modern Bantu, and in other instances, West African languages and cultures. So we will continue in that tradition here today. So let me just get ready here to share the screen of the document here. So y'all bear with me because I'm doing this on the phone. And so it's a little bit different than doing it on the laptop. So let me just increase the size of that document and we should be straight. So again, Cyena-Ntu, religious foundations in nkisi out of the Congo and Netcher in ancient Kemet. And so what you see on the right is in nkisi and Konda, which we will discuss a little bit more later on in our discourse. So and so I want to say, an unshameless plug, that what I am discussing here today is discussed in Aaluja, Volume 2, Cyena-Ntu Religion and Philosophy, which is on sale. You can get at the website at asarimhotep.com, or you can Cash App at the address below. And also in my book, Towards a Comparative Dictionary of Cikam in Modern African Languages, also on sale at the website, asarimhotep.com. and or you can directly Cash App and send me your address, and it will be on its way. So both of these texts were released earlier this year in 2020, and they both attack different aspects of this conversation, but you can find it there. So I'm summarizing both texts for you here tonight in this discussion. And so before I move forward into discussion, we always have to keep in mind that when you want to understand a people, you have to go into their cosmology and into their worldview. And so by going through the languages, we get access to the worldview. And, this is what we're going to be doing today. And so what you see here is a quote from a text, Writing African History, which was edited by John Edward Phillips. And so he says in the introduction, Africanizing history must begin with a holistic attempt to understand the total worldview and cosmology of African peoples. For without looking at their oral history in the total context of their thought, we cannot understand the meaning that that history has for them and why they have preserved it. And so we're trying to get access into the total worldview, and we are going to see the origins and the applications of the concepts of nkisi and Neter. And so today we'll be dealing with two African cultures primarily. And of course, what we have at the top here is the classical, of ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt. And then we're going to go all the way down here in, the Congo and Congo culture and Congo kingdom. And so intermediary between these two, of course, will be the Luba language and culture, which is further east, in Central Africa in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So the Kikongo speakers and Bakongo people, rest on between, on both borders of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Angola, which is, right here. And so these are the areas that we'll be addressing primarily today. And then in some East African Bantu languages like the Buganda and the Rwanda languages. So all these Great Lakes, African languages, we'll be dealing with some of them. So this whole Central Africa on, the Zaire River, as well as the Nile River coming from the Great Lakes. So we see is a continuity based on the river systems here. And this will be apparent in the language. So let's continue. So the first thing that we're going to tackle is the concept of Neter. And so this will take a little bit more time. So we'll deal with that because once we get to nkisi, it'll be straightforward from there. So let's deal with Neter. And so we say the word Neter, but that's probably not how it was pronounced in Old Kingdom and Middle Kingdom Egyptian language. And so, we stick the E's in between the consonants because the ancient Egyptians did not leave us the vowels in these two stages of the language. And so we transliterate the word Neter with these three consonants, the N and then the ch sound here and then R. And is usually defined as God or divinity or power in the Egyptian language, which I call Cikam. And so what we see here is a graphic of the word Neter. And this is the hieroglyph for the word Neter, or one of them. And this is also on the right-hand side, if you can see the mouse circling, the word for Neter as well. So both of these are words for Neter. And on the right-hand side is what we usually call a classifier or a determinative, which lets you know what class that the word in front of it belongs to. So this symbol here is representative or in association has the consonant values of NCR or NTR, and so does this, but this has no sound value in this representation here. So let's continue. So there's a text by Richard Wilkinson called The Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt. And in this text, Wilkinson notes that by examining the words used in the Egyptian text, it is clear that it actually encompasses a far wider range of meanings than the English word God. The category Neter could include deified humans, famous individuals, and from the 30th dynasty onward, those who drowned. And so those who became ancestors, as well as benevolent and malevolent spirits. So we're dealing with deified human beings, living or dead, powerful people, famous individuals, as well as good and bad spirits. And so the word Neter has a wide range of associations, and we'll get into what they are, a little later in our discourse. And so the word Neter is found in a variety of African languages. So in the Coptic language, which is an ancient Egyptian language, it is pronounced Nute. But in Sango, which is also in the Central Africa, the Republic of Congo, it is pronounced Toro, which is a spirit or a phantom. And in the same area is the Zande language, and they pronounce it Toro. But we go all the way to Ghana among the Twi Akan speakers, and they pronounce it Toro, spirit of the patrilineage. In the Ewe language, which is right under speakers right under Nigeria, they say Tro. And this Troro is actually the plural, and it will be cognate with Neteru in terms of the plural. But it's the guardian spirit or guardian spirits in this case, because it's plural. And then in the Wolof language, it's Tor, which is a protector god, as told to us by Diop. And so, it is not a concept that is restricted to ancient Kemet. It is found all over Africa, and we'll see that the word has many different dialectical pronunciations. And so these are closer to the ancient Egyptian version, but we'll see that nkisi is also a variation of this same term. And so these are some graphical representations of the Neter sign in ancient Kemet. And so what you see is A on the far left side is one of the newer versions. And so this is a pole, wrapped in linen. But in the earliest, what you see over here on the right-hand side, it was just a stick with cloth strips hanging from the top. So that's what this is. So this is the pre-dynastic version of the representation for the word Neter. And you can see them on old pot marks, as we can see here in these phrases. And so this is a phrase here. So we can see in this one representation, there are 3 strips of cloth, but in this pot mark, in these pot marks is primarily 2 strips of cloth on a pole or a stick. And so this combination of this star with the little loop over it is Chabed Neter, which is the word for a lunar festival of the divine. And so in this representation, these are kind of small images. So I'm not sure if you can see, but this one has 3 strokes, just like what we saw up there. And this glyph here is the word Hes. And it can stand for either the God is praised, or the God be praised, or the one who praises the God and the divine. So that's what this, so the word Ches is the word for praise. So to praise God or God is praised. So it's a variety of ways in which you can interpret this combination of signs. But this is pre-dynastic, before 3200 BCE, that you find these signs. So this is a very old concept in ancient Kemet. And so remember that the symbol is a stick that is wrapped in linen. And there's a different word Then the word for divine in terms of neter, that means garment or material, types of cloth. And you can see it in this word sacher netre, meaning linen. And this word sacher means deceased or nobility, and also to bind with bandages or to mummify. And so we're talking about the kind of wrappings that you would wrap a mummy with in many instances. And so the cognate for this word neter or garment for material can be found in the Yoruba language as tala, and is mousseline or calico or white cloth. And so this word tala is misinterpreted in the name Obatala in the Yoruba language. They say king of the white cloth, but that's not the word. It's really exalted king. That's what this word Obatala means. It's the exalted king. But Perinemy, in folk etymology, interprets Obatala as king of the white cloth. And so the word for white in Yoruba language is Allah. So we continue. And so you can see this kind of 3D graphical representation of the neter poles in front of one of the temples that you would see. So when you go to the temples, you don't see these poles anymore. But we know from graphical representations as well as old models that they would build before actually building the big buildings, that in the front of them were these neter poles. And so these were just the word for pole and the word for cloth and the word for spirit were all represented by the consonant cluster. The consonant series N and then ch, which is a palatalization, consonant coming from K, which we'll deal with in a second, and R. So that's what you see here. And so, as I just mentioned, the ch in neter is an evolution in the sound of a velar, a K sound. And so this was noted in 1997 in a text called Semitic Languages, an Outline of a Comparative Grammar. And so they're talking about, certain sounds in ancient Egyptian. And so the author notes that the velar K is palatalized into ch in various circumstances, especially when it is contiguous to the vowel I or U, so or I or U. Thus, the Old Egyptian pronominal suffix ki of the second person feminine singular became ch, and it is conventionally transcribed as ch or T with an underline under it by Egyptologists. The Egyptian name Neter, God, is believed to be related to Semitic Nker, stranger, but it should perhaps be linked with Agav, which is a Cushitic language, Nkera, soul or spirit. So prior to it being Neter, it was Nkera, like what you see in Agav. Also, T may be palatalized as, for example, the Semitic word kat, hand, well known in East Semitic, which corresponds to West Cushitic Omatic kitch or kiss, hand, arm. I won't go into the deepness of this, but this kitch and kiss is also nkisi. And the ultimate origin comes from a word for limb or hand and things of this nature. And we can discuss that a little later. And so we'll continue. And so there's a second text, Black Athena, Volume 3, The Linguistic Evidence by Martin Bernal. He discusses the same thing as well. And so he says the hieroglyph for neter, R8, which is a cloth wound round a pole, an emblem of divinity used broadly for gods, including deceased monarchs, so deceased ancestral kings, and for the life force in general. So we're dealing with a spiritual principle. The life force is also represented by neter. Even more difficult to define is ka. Some people say the ka, which in the D28 symbol embracing the arms. It is a spirit or one of the Egyptian souls, a manifestation, agent, or doppelganger of a person or divinity. In other words, the life force of a person, kind of like with Neter here. Interestingly, Neter and Ker may well have a common origin, and we will discuss here that that is in fact the case, that actually the Ker or Nkera here is a dialectical variation of Neter. They're one and the same word. It's a doublet in the Egyptian language. The origin of Egyptian ch from an earlier kya or a k, with an I or e, after it, and this, which we argue is a nasalized volar trio, is a type of R as a liquid R or L. So when people say ka, it's not ka, it's like kala, kere, kira, etc. So that's why I pronounce it that way. We're discussing chapter 8 above. Thus, one could hypothesize a form nkera in which originally allophonic variants of k or kya became phonemically distinct and palatalized, and the palatalized variant lost its initial N. In fact, the hypothetical protoforms exist in reality as Nkera and Ankera or Nkera, soul or life, in the Central Cushitic languages of Benin and Kwara. Franz Callis pointed this out in his posthumanist work published in 1936. So what we're saying here is that for now on, even though this says, we in the Egyptological literature, they'll say ka, we're going to say kera. And in Neter and in Toro, in Turu, something along that line. So we can see here that we have two authors who are arguing that kera and Neter are the same word, and that the Neter form is the later and the kera form is the older. And so the former form of Neter was Nkera. And so what I'm about to say now has to deal with this concept called Perinemy in linguistics. And so Perinemy has to deal with the belief that two or more words that sound alike must necessarily have a common origin. And thus, that belief of a common origin of two or more words that sound alike, the ancient indigenous people would synthesize these concepts that, these two or more homonyms that had different meanings, and would synthesize them and create deities, create culture, create rituals, etc., and mythology, on their understanding or misunderstanding on the etymology of these words. And so we'll see how this plays out. And in reality, in this case, they actually do have the same origin. And so when we see this word kera in Egyptian, it's also found in the Akan and Tree languages as okra, meaning soul or spirit. In the Ga language, which is, next door to the Tree Akan speakers, they say kla instead for soul and spirit. And then, of course, we just seen from the Benin and the Kwara Cushitic languages, Nkera, Nkira for soul life, or Nkera, long A and long E, soul life in those two languages. Then you have in the Tio language, so-called Niger-Congo language, Nkira, meaning spirit. And so I rather use Nkira or Kira for so-called Ka and so. And so what we see here in the corner right here is the hieroglyph, which is a pair of arms raised with the palms up. And that's because this consonant sequence, this K and this R sound, the nasalized volar trio, also is associated with the word for arms in Cyena-Ntu languages. And so that is explained more in the text. So there's also a word, kira, meaning to say, and also the word for name and speech in the Egyptian language. And so we find cognates in the Hebrew and Arabic languages as kero and kera, meaning to call or to say or to read aloud. In the Hausa language, it's kira, call. And in Ciluba Bantu, it's akula, oral, or akula, talk, speak, utter, express. With a nominal prefix, it's mwakulu, language. In the Igbo language, they say kalu, voice, sound, or to declare something. In a tree, we have kra. So remember that there's an okra, meaning spirit or soul, and now you have this word kra, meaning call for or place an order, still having to deal with speech. And the Hebrew kol, sound, voice, thunder. And so this is very important because, again, this word kera in Egyptian has to deal also with the word for name. And it tells you that the concept of a name is related to the word for speech or to call. Your name is your calling. It is your purpose. It's associated with purpose. And so in the Egyptian, you have kera, name, and also kera, to say. And we see the same semantics in a tree language, in the word bidin, to name, and bidin, to call. And that word din is also a dialectical variation of the word kera. We won't go into that right now, but you can see that the same relationship exists between the name of something and the word for to call or to say, voice, speech, etc. And so we see this in for example, in Hebrew, the word shem, where we get the word Semitic from out of the Bible, is simply a word for name or fame. Its cognate in Arabic is isim, hasim, meaning name and fame. Now, they don't have the words for voice or speech for these cognates, but you find, in the African languages, the counter, or not the counter, but the companion of the word for name, meaning to, dealing with speech. So in the tree language, it's asim, proclamation. In Yoruba, esun, proclamation. In Yoruba, again, fesun, to report, or a report. In Kiswahili, it's sima, say or speech. So you can see that, by examining the related languages, we can see these types of relationships, because this is going to be important for understanding nature in a little bit, and nkisi. So, keep all of these things in mind as we're talking. And so this is just another example here of the relationship between speech and name. And so in the Yoruba language, there's a word, daruko, meaning to mention the name of. And then in Arabic, there is a variant of this word, but there's metathesis between the K and the R, and it means to mention. In the Assyrian language, is zikaru, to mention, to name. Zekara, zekar in Hebrew, to remember. And so there's a relationship between the calling and then the name and memory and remembrance. And so to call and to name something has to deal with to give something purpose, a calling. That's what your name is. But it's also, your name is a memory. It's memorization. Is to mention the name of something. And so this is what we see here. And so in the Egyptian, so remember that this symbol here, the nasalized uvula trio, which is represented by this vulture glyph here, is seker, remembrance, memory, call to mind, to mention. So all of these, this is the semantic field for which, words in these Cyena-Ntu languages save the Semitic, and even in Semitic, between name, call, and now to mention in memory. And so we continue with the text. There is a living king coming out of Ghana and who was also a professor. His name is Dr. Anthony Ephraim Doncourt. And he wrote a text in 2013, which is actually the second edition, titled African Religion Defined, a systematic study of ancestor worship among the Akan. And remember that, you know, you had the word okra and kra in the tree and Akan languages. And so he talks about that, and we get some insight into what the ka in ancient Egypt, or the kera, is in relationship to how we find it among the Akan people. So he says on page 54, going into 55, Kwame Gaikai, or Gikye, for example, maintains that the okra, the soul or the spirit, is located in the head. Although in general, the Akan believe that the seat of the okra is the shoulders, or that the shoulders balance the soul in the head as the head. The seat of intelligence sits on the shoulders. Still, the fact is that to call anyone by name is to call the soul of that individual. And since the soul is an intangible agency, it is assumed that the dead has appeared in spirit. And so he's linking these concepts together in terms of spirit, in terms of calling, and to mention the name is to call the soul. And so I did a whole lecture on the concept of the soul in African languages and African communities of memory. And so people have a misunderstanding of what the soul is. The soul is simply your name. It is the purpose, the essential purpose that you came here to do. And so to call, as he says here, to call anyone by name is to call the soul of that individual. Your soul is your name. It's not some like separate entity. It's your purpose. It's your calling, what you came to earth to do. And so your name is a reminder of what you came here to do, because in many African cultures, your name, you exist in spirit form before you were incarnated in human form, and that the ancestors and the community and the beyond sent you on a mission and brought you here with gifts. And so the name that is attached to you is to remind you of why you came here to earth in the first place. And so it's a North Star. It is a goal for you to fulfill. And so this is why naming is very important in African societies. And you just don't name your child anything. And why we have so many names, because we get new names during initiation. So now in the Egyptian, remember that the word kera or the ka, we could say ka in this instance, is the hieroglyph for arms and hands, and also the shoulders here. And so remember, you know, in the Akan, let's go back, he says the Akan believe that the seat of the okra is the shoulders, or that the shoulders balance the soul in the head as the head, the seat of intelligence. Let me bring that back. Oops. Sorry. There we go. And so we see in the ancient Egyptian that they had a similar concept in mind. Again, this is due to Perinemy. So we see here this pharaoh, statue of Horewibra, with the ka on his head. And you can see that the ka, this symbol that you see here over here on the right, or the kera, is the open palms, hands, the arms, and shoulders. And so it's no coincidence that we have in tree, krado, shoulders. But in Egyptian, we have the voiced. Remember that the kera is the voiceless variant, and now the voice variant is gerha, or girha, or gerahi, or something to that nature. And so it's the same word here. And so because krado sounds like it has okra name and spirit, and kra, to say, to name or whatnot, all of that stuff sounds alike. And so Perinemy comes to play, where they linked and they synthesize all three of these concepts. And so we see the same thing even happening in Egyptian. So the fact that this was voiced, the G, lets us know that the Egyptian lost a nasal sound in front of it, because the nasal voiced the voiceless velar K here. So let's continue. So we see how Perinemy works here. And so we'll see here that the word kerarut, to carry, to support. And so you see the hieroglyph of the, seated man with a kind of a bowl or something on his head, meaning to carry, it's a symbol of carrying and supporting on the head. And so there's a kerit, meaning thought, and keri, to think about and plot. And so I mentioned in a previous lecture that in many African languages, in many African communities, there is no difference between speech and thought. And so your speech is just the verbalization of your thoughts. So they're one and the same. So it's not surprising that they are the same word in ancient Egyptian. And so, all of this comes together, they synthesize this. And then of course, kere, or kera, soul, spirit, personality, essence. And so the Egyptians use all of this. And actually there's another kera, or kerera, meaning powers in the Egyptian. And there's a word kerit, also meaning to work, or work that has been done. And that's going to be essential. So let's go to Modupe Odioye, who wrote a chapter, he wrote several chapters in this text, Traditional Religion in West Africa. And he gives us some insight into the kra, or kla, among the Twi and the Ga speakers. And he says that we can think of kra, or kla, as consciousness. And in another lecture, I show how the word for thought and spirit and speech, they're the same in African languages. So it's as consciousness, the part of a man that responds to a calling. So consciousness has to deal with spirit. There's two types of spirit among African people. There's consciousness and thought and speech. And then there is the concept of force and power. And those are the two manifestations of spirit among African peoples. And so we're talking about a spirit, a consciousness that responds to a calling. That means you can activate it by knowing the name of these entities, or these spirits, or consciousness. And so we can see this kind of matrix between this concept of kera, which later became chur and netcher. And remember, this is the nasalized velar trill. This is an R type sound. And so in one direction, it means to say or speech. And then from that word comes this word name or personality that you see here. And then there's another one being to be powerful. And it's this word for powerful that becomes the word for spirit. And, to be powerful, to be able to do that, is to be able to do or to act. And then with the nominal T becomes the word for work. And then to be powerful is the origin of the word for bull and cow, or any kind of dangerous beast in Cyena-Ntu languages. So this is discussed, of course, in Aaluja Volume 2, and you can learn more there. So this is a good matrix to learn. So now we're going to go into the concept of netcher in the Congo. And so to prove that the word netcher originally had an NKR or NKL consonant sequence, we can compare it with Ciluba Bantu out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So you can see I have the consonants highlighted in these different colors. So the prefix N is highlighted in blue, and then the root which is in the Egyptian, the Cikam case, is the palatalization of the K, which is the ch sound, and then the R sound here. And so in Ciluba, it is K and then L. And so you can see the sound correspondences here. So it's N to N, Ciluba, and Cikam to Ciluba, N to N, and then Ch to K, and then Egyptian R to L. So that's how you read this on the side. So this word Neter, meaning God, is cognate with Nkole and Nkwele, God, in the Ciluba Bantu language. And other manifestations is Bankole or Bankola, meaning spirits or ghosts. And then you have Mukulu, God, as a different manifestation of the same root. And so you have Neterit, meaning fixed, set, solid, firm, and hard, is cognate with the root Kale, meaning strong, well, vigorous, arduous, firm, steady, stable, solid, hard, immovable, fixed, steadfast, powerful, robust, tough as meat. And you also had this word Ikala, meaning to be, to stay, to remain. And so Neteri, divine, sacred, Bukale, sacred in Ciluba. Neteri or Intorori Wa, meaning priest of Ra. And then we have Makwidi, priest, coming from a root Aquila, advocate for, defend, rule over, to govern. And then you have Neter, power, divinity. Neter Khiri, divine, strong. And Bukole, strength, energy, express. Ngulu, strength, physical power. So remember what I said in the previous slide, that when the K sound is often prefixed by the nasal N, it can strengthen the K to be pronounced as a G, G. So that's what you see here in Gulu. It's the same word. It's just a sound change that happened. So with these sound correspondences, it lets you know that the word for God is even in the text, Neter, meaning power, divine and strong. And so it's an agent of power, strength, a force. And this is discussed in more detail in Aaluja Volume 2. And so in this slide, I show that there's another dialectical variation of the word Neter besides Keri or Ka in the Egyptian. There's also Iri. And so this, what I have highlighted in the red, this J or this Y or E sound corresponds in Egyptian as well as in Ciluba with the K. And so we've already established it that Egyptian or Cikam R corresponds to the L in the second consonant position in Ciluba. And so we're seeing the correspondences here between the E or the Y sound here and the K in Ciluba. So that's why I highlighted those in red, so you can kind of focus on that. So you have Iri, meaning to recite, Akula, meaning oral in Ciluba, Akula, talk, speak, utter, express, Makulu, language, Iri, to make, to act, Bukole, power, energy, ability to make things happen, to do things. And in the Heban, which is a quarterphone language, Ngiro, work. And so we'll show in a little bit why this idea to do things, to work, and work in the noun, in the nominal sense, and power and energy are related. And so power, energy, work are the nominalization of the verb, or the verb meaning to do things in these African languages. So Iri or Iru, ancestors, Bakulu, ancestors, Iri, to revert, and then Aluka, revert, return. So I think the K is missing, here, but it's a nominal, or it's a verbal prefix. Ku is the infinitive, meaning to, like to do something. And so when you can put that there, it'd be Kwaluka, and then the A will be assimilated to the U, so it'd be Kuluka. And so the good thing about establishing the relationship between Egyptian and Ciluba Bantu in the Democratic Republic of Congo is that when you know the etymology of the roots of words in Ciluba, you can establish the origin and the roots in the Egyptian once you set the sound meaning correspondences that we see here. And so the root of the words for, power and God in Ciluba is ila. And this word ila means to make, leave, or exit from oneself. For example, a sound. So that's where the words for speech comes from. An idea, speech, or an object. To emit something or to express, meaning to create something. To speak, also to introduce, to put, set, make, push, dispose, arrange, lay, apply, put out, or to place. And so it's talking about a movement from a didactic center. And so this ila, remember that the L corresponds to Egyptian R. In Cikam, it is to separate, toward. It's a movement, it's a separation from a center. It's a propagation forward. And so a variant of this word ila is ilela, make a, or to do, for, in favor of, versus to the disadvantage of, to launch something, sure against, towards. So ilela are towards, in, applied form of the word for ila. So ila is a suffix. And there's some vowel harmony going. So you can see that the other form in Cikam is iri, to make, to create, to engender. And so these are all variants of the same root here. And so when there's a prefix, there's a variant of this in Ciluba, ingila. So from ila, ingila. A person who acts consistently, an agent, a doer, agent, man of action, good marksmanship, a marksman. And so in Cikam is iru, maker of something. And is also, a doer of something. It's an agent, because this W here is an agent suffix in Cikam. And so the agent prefix in Egyptian, in Ciluba is this in. So that's an agent. And so the in, this ngila is a dialectical variation of this word nkole, nkwele, God. And the same word that is used for God is nkole or ngole, ngola, meaning eminent or powerful man. And so Neter, God, in Egyptian. Bukole, force, energy, spirit. And Ngulus, strength, physical power. So how has this come to be? Let's look at some sound laws and change here. So what I mentioned in the previous slide, or the previous two slides, that there is a verbal prefix in Bantu called ku. You say ku. And so this ku plus ila, our root, gives us the word kwele. And then it gives us a dialect, a variant, kole. And so there's a rule that the W or U sound plus E gives us O in Cibantu. And so you see this variation, here's another example, is the word mweneka. And we can see when the W is next to E, it turns into O. Moneka. And well, this is in French, to be visible, perceptible, or to appear, or to emerge. And so this prefix, kwela, or kwele, or kwela, becomes kole, kola. So this is how you see here in this, while you have inkole, inkola, and inkwele, inkwela, meaning God, an eminent or powerful man. Both of these variants come from ila. And so this is another variant of the same word, because the ku, the K became voice with the prefix of the ng, the agent prefix. So they kept it as ngila. It didn't, the sound change didn't happen as far as the initial vowel. So it's still pronounced ngila. But in this other, it became inquela, because the K is rounded with the W sound. And the W next to the E, it becomes O. And so that's how you get Nkole, Ngole, and Ngulu. This is all the same words. And so we got to understand the nature of sound change. And so in the Luganda language, in Uganda or Buganda, they have kukola, to make. And so we can tell that either this is a borrowing into the Luganda language from a Ciluba type language, or the word kola was fossilized. And so they reuse the ku prefix, the verbal prefix. So you have ku in here twice. And so this came from quela, and then kuola, and then just simply cola. And because it's fossilized now, they still had the ku prefix. They re-put the ku prefix in the same word, with the same word. So it's kukola, to make, to emit, to express. And so this is this types of stuff, and why you get doublets in the language, and like what you see in the Egyptian. So the Egyptian has a mixture of fossilizations as well as, still being able to use and establish the word formation process that we see in Chi-Bantu. And so some important definitions. So when we talk about power, what is power? Is the ability to act or to do. It's associated with strength, vigor, and might, especially in battle. Efficacy, control, mastery, lordship, dominion, ability or right to command or control. Legal power or authority, authorization, military force, and army. And so when you see that word inkola, inkwele, inkwela, and associated with God, because the words for God in spirit in Egyptian, well, in Cyena-Ntu African languages, emanate from a verb meaning to do, to act. And then when it's nominalized, it means power or energy or strength, command, authority, etc. And so that's why it's associated with an eminent or powerful man, such as a king or any kind of administrator, somebody who has agency, who has command over people in a hierarchy, and who has the intellect or power to do or make things happen. And so the word energy means the ability to act, to lead others, affect, etc., forcefully. The capacity for vigorous activity, available power, from Proto-Indo-European Reconstruction word, meaning to do. So energy is a nominal word, meaning a noun, from a verb meaning to do or to act, just like what we see with the word power. So we can see that this semantics is very telling. And so the very word work in English comes from this word werg. So werg, to do. So work is that which has been done. And then, of course, to work means to do, to be able to construct, to create, or to move something. That's what work is. So the very word work and energy are the same. That's why it's the ability to do work in science when we talk about energy. So energy is not a physical substance that permeates throughout the universe. It's just talking about the potential to make things happen. That's what energy is. And so we sum up this section with this kind of language, or this graph that I put here, or this table, I mean, that I put here. And so you can, this is on the left is Ciluba, and in Cikam on the right, and then it's further split into two columns on each side of the main, columns here. And so we have our root illa, to make, leave, or exit from oneself, etc. And from this root here, and we're going down the columns just like this, if you can see my mouse. And so illa, make or to do. And from this root here becomes bukole, energy or spirit. And then inkole or inkola, God or a powerful man. And so that same root ella, to make or leave from the self, any sound or idea. So that's where you get the root to speak, illa, in speech. And then when the ku prefix is akula, talk, utter, express. So you can see how this one root gives way to this concept of to do or to act. Also energy, power, and spirit, and God and powerful people is also the same root for to speak in anything dealing with utterances. And we see the same thing in Cikam. And so R, to separate, to, toward, and we should be able to equate the same things here, in which I do in the text. And on this column, this same root, when prefix, means iri, to do, to make. And then it's the same root that's in the word kiri, spirit. And then, of course, the palatalized form, neter, God, spirit. And so in this column, R is also the word for to speak. And from there, it was nominalized, meaning mouth. And then iri, to recite. And then ker, to say. And then teri, to complain. So we can see that even the ter form has to deal with some kind of relation to speech. And so this is just showing that the concept of neter and keri are the same. They derive from the same root. And it is the same in Ciluba. And we would expect this because Ciluba Bantu and Cikam or Egyptian are related languages. And so we're going to have to keep all of this in mind. And so on the left-hand side, you see Egyptian hieroglyphs that all have the same consonant sequence. All three of these are rendered as neter in the Egyptian hieroglyphs. And so when we see this, it's no coincidence that this is the classifier, the determinative for a deity in Egyptian. And so it is Nkole, Ngole, eminent or powerful man. That's what you see here. Nkole, Nkwele, God. And in the Collagen language and Nilotic language, it's Nkolo, God. A variant in Kikongo is Nkwiyi, Nkwiya, ghost, spirit. In Proto-Bantu is cold, to become strong. And then this is a hawk. And the palatalized form in Ciluba is Ntala, a male bird. In Collagen is Kirit, a type of hawk. In Proto-Bantu is Kodi, hawk. So the word for hawk has to deal with the word for to become strong. And so, but this word for neter here is also pronounced her. So when we say heru, like we see over here on the right-hand side. So it's telling you, and I give the sound correspondences in Aaluja Volume 2, that the word neter and the word heru are the same word. So heru is another word for divine or to be strong. And the Bantu languages help to prove that. And so this is just the hawk on a standard hieroglyph at the bottom on the left-hand side here. And so, this is also used in words for king or gods. And so Mukulu, chief, director, president, head. Nkela, an erudite, learned man, an educated, civilized, and noble person. So a priest. Nkela. And this is Ciluba. So you know, the languages help tremendously in helping to understand that. So in summary of this section, these are some key things to understand. And so the word nature derives from a root meaning to do or to act. When the verb is nominalized, it means power, strength, or energy. When prefixed with the agent morpheme, that is the in, the in nature, it means one with the ability to act or to do. A prominent or eminent man, a god or a spirit. In other words, an agent. Invisible or visible. It's just some entity with that has the power to make change in all areas of life. And so what we add here is that often the term nature often refers to a type of spirit that responds to a calling. That means by verbal commands. So you can activate the spirit. And this is going to become very important. And so all of these concepts are due to Perinemy. And so keep that in mind. So now we're going to go to the Congo. We're going to deal with nkisi. And so a mukisi is the singular, and mukisi in Kikongo has become nkisi. And the plural is minikisi. So we want to say the nkisi. So this is an nkisi and konde on the right-hand side that you see here. We'll get into more of that a little later. But the word nkisi, or the concept of an nkisi or an nkishi, are spirits or an object that a spirit inhabits. This is going to be very important. So remember, let's repeat that. An nkisi or nkishi are spirits or an object that a spirit inhabits. It is frequently applied to a variety of objects used throughout the Congo Basin in Central Africa, especially in the territory of Cabinda, that are believed to contain spiritual powers or spirits. The term and its concept have passed with the Atlantic slave trade to the Americas, and primarily in places like Haiti, Cuba, Brazil, and other places in South America. So we're going to get a little deeper now. So the author Nsimi Nsaki out of a Congo states that the nkisi is the name of things we use to help a man when he is sick and from which we obtain health. The name refers to leaves and medicines combined together. So this would make sense. So let's rewind. An nkisi, as we saw up here, are spirits or an object that a spirit inhabits. And so the spirit in this case is housed in the leaves and medicines. And so the spirit, the objects of nature are the containers of spirit. And so nkisi is the name of things we use to help a man when he is sick and from which we obtain health. The name refers to leaves and medicines combined together. And nkisi is also something that hunts down illnesses and chases it away from the body. Many people, therefore, compose an nkisi, in other words, an composed medicine. It is a hiding place for people's souls. What did I tell you about what a soul is? A soul is a spirit or a consciousness that responds to a calling, okra, kla, to keep and compose in order to preserve life. And so in this context, an nkisi is used primarily in the field of medicine. And so they're looking for the spiritual active ingredients in the leaves or other aspects of the medicine that is responsible for the healing process in man. And so Fukiao, in his African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo, tells us what the many nkisis are made of. And he said the essential parts of any nkisi are mutadi, minerals, being benina. Excuse me, I mispronounced that. Benina, plants, and bulu, animals, because they surround and form the basis of life for the Congo people. So anything that is the foundation for life becomes the aspects of the nkisi, the medicines. So medicines consist of, or the nkisi, when it's in medicine form, consists of minerals, plants, and animals. Just like, in any modern day, all medicines, that's what it is, mineral, plants, and animals. So it's no different in this case. So this is an nkisi and Kondi figure. And as you can see, it is a very unique sculpture, wooden carving, and it has all kinds of symbolism and things. And you can see, I don't know how well you can see, but this nkisi and Kondi has nails in it and has a big hole in the kind of chest or stomach, area. And, all of this is explained in a number of texts. And so in nkisi and Kondi, really getting into depth of what that is a lecture unto itself. But, we'll just briefly state some things. So this one website talks about, they use the word fetishes. We don't like the word fetishes. We'll just say nkisi were protective, or the nkisi and Kondi were protective figures used by individuals, families, or whole communities to destroy or weaken evil spirits, prevent or cure illnesses, repel bad deeds, solemnize contracts or oath-taking, and decide arguments. And so in the African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo by Fukuyao and his text in Mbongi, he kind of explains how the nkisi were used to make contracts. And what they would do is put those nails into the figure and tie ropes and other kind of cloths, to it, or they would nail the cloths and the ropes to the figure, like kind of what we see on the right-hand side here, to the nkisi and Kondi. And that would symbolize the presence of a contract or some kind of news, or a script for writing and things of this nature. And he goes into great detail in those texts. And so it's a lot more involved than what is noted here. But again, when you make a contract or an oath with somebody, instead of signing, because they didn't have writing like we have writing in the traditional communities. So what they would do is nail a uniquely tied piece of rope that was their writing, and that would be the contract that was signed. And so you would nail that or sign it, make these Nati ropes and Nati nails, or these nails into the Nkondi, the Nkisi and Kondi figure. And so these Nkisi and Kondi gained power and were effective because people believed in them. No, let me go back. So a diviner or a holy person known as an Nganga would activate the statue. How would they activate it? It's by words of power. And so this concept of activation, because in African spiritual traditions and medical things, you just can't give people medicine. You have to activate it. And I discussed this in depth in the second to the last chapter of Aaluja Volume 2. So if you have Aaluja Volume 2, read the second to the last chapter, and you'll see all the citations, across the continent, where they would have to activate the medicines by using certain chants and words of power in a certain frequency and things of this nature to activate that, to tell the medicine where to go. And so all the medicines have a certain name, they have a soul, they have a calling. And so if you know the name of the particular medicine, the spirit that is housed in the leaves and the minerals and the plants and the in the animals, you can activate it, command it to go and do what you want it to do, and it would enhance the potency of the medicine. That's what it means to activate medicine in a traditional African sense. And so the second to the last chapter, chapter 12, is where I go into depth about that. And so Fukiao continues in terms of Nkondi. Nkondi is like a diploma given to an Nganga, who is a specialist who deals with social issues. He can be seen as a therapist who is invited to deal with any issue that is a problem in the village. Before they start discussing the matter, he has to put before him his Nkondi to assure the village that he is qualified to discuss the mambo. The word mambo became mumbo jumbo in the West. Without this object, the community won't accept him as trained or qualified. So it's a diploma, it's a degree, it's a PhD in healing and dealing with social matters in the Congo. So if the person didn't come with the specialized in Kondi, the people did not take them serious, because this is their way of proving that they have mastered the art of healing, or the art of revitalization, which we call Ki-Moyo. So we know the term Nganga, but this person would also be known as an Nkwa Ki-Moyo or Nkwa-Moyo, meaning, the life of Ki-Moyo, or the person the agent responsible for the regenerative arts called Ki-Moyo, the art of adding life to life, a healer. So you're seeing how all this is coming together in terms of Ki-Moyo, Maat, Kalunga. If you remember the last conversation that we had. And so, all of this is coming together. And so what are the Nkondi used for? The Nkondi was truly a document on which contracts were signed. The knots can be tied by an individual or the community. Remember what I said, the knots, the ropes would be tied in certain knots, and there would be people or specialists who can read the knots. So the way that they tied it, you read it like you were reading a letter or a book. And then it would be nailed to the Nkondi figure, the nkisi and Kondi figure. And so that was a contract between two or more people. And so these knots can be tied by an individual or the community itself, because they would have these big Nkondi. So the little ones that you saw there, they would also have bigger representations of them. So that more than, several dozen people will come in and put their nails in. The Nganga, the specialist, will lead a person to a resolution. He was also a counselor, a judge of sorts. Then he will tie, or an eminent or powerful person. And in Nkole, or Nkole, a knot, and they will nail it to the Nkondi. From that time on, the person who signs the contract or the document has to act upon that contract or that agreement in his life. So the people witnessing you nailing the tied piece of rope and the nail into the Nkondi, that is a signature. And so from there, you have agreed with the spirits and the community to act accordingly to the agreement that, you and the other parties have made. So now let's get into some linguistics. And so what does nkisi mean and ultimately come from? The word nkisi comes from kit, or kiti, or kisi, or kila in Proto-Bantu, meaning to do or to act. Another Proto-Bantu reconstruction is gid, the voice variant, meaning to do, to make, or to act. As I said before, the idea of to do and to act is what it means to make or to express something. It's the power to make things happen. And so in Uganda, they say lukisa. And so it's a charm of powdered herbs worn on a woman's waist to ensure fertility. And she, Ngisho, these are all Bantu languages surrounded by the Great Lakes, or surrounding the Great Lakes, I should say. Gisho means chance, luck, blessing. Ngisha, thing of a supernatural power, a fetish or an amulet. In Rwanda, Gisha, chance or blessing. Iangisha, an amulet ensuring good fortune and prosperity. Activated or powerful medicine. Again, this relationship of activation to medicine. It has to be activated. And in Kondi, and in Nkisi and Kondi in the Congo, it's not potent as an object until it is activated, until it is consecrated, until words of power are spoken into it. And so, continuing in Rwanda, Umugisha, prosperity, well-being, luck, good fortune, good understanding. We continue in the Doko language, Keta, a recent dead, an ancestor. In Proto-Northern Zaire, Southwestern Bantu, this is right below in of the Congo. It is Keti, Keta, meaning nature, spirit, or charm. So it's the spirits found in nature. So remember what we said in nkisi or in kishi, that it is a spirit and also an object, or the spirit that an object that houses the spirit. So that's why the nkisi and kondi is very important. It houses spirits. It houses medicine, but leaves, water, animals, minerals, etc., plants are also objects that house spirits. And so when you go into ancient Kemet, they would create these statues, these netchers, these nkisi and kondi figures, and they would command spirits to come to the statues and then command them to do, certain things in reality. And so in the Luena language, mukishi, spirit, fetish, charm. And they were also, an amulet is an object that is consecrated to fight off and ward off evil spirits or bad issues going on in one's life. That's what an amulet is. And in Bundu, ikisi, fetish, charm, spirit. Haya and Gisha, charm of wood. In Timbasis, worn by a Mugasha priest. And so the citation is Schronberg, 1997, page 188. And has to deal with the comparative Bantu of the Great Lakes region. So it is this form, kiti, that is our, in Ciluba, in Kwela, because the la, the illa comes from T and D in Proto-Bantu. So the Ciluba is Kwela, but in the doublet in Proto-Bantu is kita, or kiti, kita, kite, or kita, because all verbs usually end in A. So that's why you have kila here. And so because of the T being intervocally, when it is followed by E or the I sound, it becomes palatalized and becomes chi. And that chi becomes si. So that's where we get nkisi from nkichi, or kishi from kiti. But when it is followed by A, it just weakens to a liquid sound or an R sound. So you say kira or kila. And it comes, and that's the verb meaning to do, to make, or to act. And so, as I said, words for God, spirit, in Cyena-Ntu derives from words meaning to do, to act, to make, to express, etc., etc. And then when the verb is nominalized, it becomes power or strength, and then it becomes words for an agent who has the ability to act or to work. And so we continue, and we can see that even in Ciluba, we can see in relationship to nature this relationship of nkisi and kichi and kasa, etc. And so we have, this is, I did a comparison earlier where I showed you that the Ciluba KL and GL consonant sequences matches with the ch R in Cikam or Egyptian. And so we continue this, but we notice a different sound that it also corresponds with. And so we have netiri, natron, soda, trona, sodium bicarbonate, carbonate. And so natron is a type of salt. And so in Ciluba, it's mukele, mukela, salt, or ingala, salt. And then we notice that neteru, sacred rod, pole, or staff. And then in Ciluba, it's mukwasa, stick, baton, staff, pole. And then netiri, pure, purified, clean, clean. And then Ciluba is keza or kinza, purify, to make clean. And then netiri, a kind of cloth. And then in Ciluba, chikusu kusu, cloth, rag. And so this Z becomes R. And so it's so this is where, again, where you get the when it's E or I, and it becomes kisi or kiti. This is where you're getting kisi and kishi and gisha, keta, keti, all these different sound changes, all corresponding with these things, with these sounds in Ciluba. I mean, excuse me, with the R, for example, in Cikam or Egyptian. And so if you have Aaluja Volume 2, you know that, the language family, I renamed the Negro Egyptian from Theophilo Benga and Jean-Claude Mbongi to Chiankanda, and then a subgroup of Chiankanda being Cyena-Ntu that I've been speaking of since the beginning of this conversation. And so, I won't get into this now, but this is just the hierarchy and the evolution of the Chiankanda Chikulu, or the ancient Paleo-African language that gave birth to Cyena-Ntu, which gave birth to Hausa, Zande, Middle Egyptian, Coptic, Proto-Bantu, Sango, Somali, Sumerian, etc. And so, that's a different conversation for another day. But the reflexes in Cyena-Ntu, as reconstructed by Mbongi, and this validates his reconstruction, is kwichi ngwa, and that is to construct or to make. And remember, to make or to construct also means to do or to act. And where the nge or ingwe is the suffix of agent. So like the in, so this ingwe that you see here, this is what becomes the in that is prefixed in Bantu and in Egyptian. But in other Cyena-Ntu languages, it is suffixed. So it's nkwiti n. And so the reflexes of this form can be found in Middle Egyptian as ked, meaning to construct, to form, to fashion. In Coptic is kot, to build. And Sango is kode, crafts, manual skills. In the Hausa language, it's gida, construction. Zande, kana, to make. Hausa, kira, model, design. And in Sumerian, it is kid, kad, to weave a mat. And then you have kid, ki, to build, to make, and to act, just like what we saw in the other languages. So it's, again, this idea of to do, to make, to act, to build, to express, et cetera, et cetera. It has many different semantic trajectories. And in the earliest of the languages, they would have these prefixes and the suffixes, which would expand the meaning. But over time, these prefixes and suffixes would cause sound changes to the words in the respective dialects and languages. And in some languages, they lost the prefixes and suffixes, or in some languages, the prefixes and suffixes were fossilized. So that's how we get these different variations of the same word in all these related languages. And so the nkisi is from the kwiti, which is where we get the word keri and nature and, in Kole and in Kwele and in Gila and, all these variations, Kukola, all of these are different variations of the same word. And so this is the relationship. This is how you establish the relationship between them. But what is meant, again, by a spirit or a god? And so, as I discussed in Aaluja Volume 2, that there is a word adro among the Luganda speakers. And, excuse me, not Luganda, the Lugbara speakers. And so there's a text, Lugbara religion, ritual authority among an East African people, published in 1960. And this word is cognate with nature. And so by reading this, you get a firm understanding of what a nature is, because it's the same thing that you find in ancient Kemet, just now amongst the Lugbara under this variation of Adro. And since we've just equated nkisi with nature, this applies to the nkisi, and it helps to explain nkisi some more. And so in the text on pages 252 to 255, he says, I translate Adro and Adroa as God, although the correspondence of meaning is not exact. Adro, the basic form of the term, refers to a personified force outside the control and beyond the understanding of living men who are his creatures. So it is an invisible power or force. Indeed, unlike our term God in English, Adro is used also to refer to a category of objects, which are manifestations of divinity and beyond the control and understanding of men. So just like nkisi was a spirit and also an object that housed spirits. And spirits are powers, invisible forces beyond, outside of the control, the general control of men, and beyond the understanding of living men, unless you are a specialist. If you are Ki-Moyo or Ki-Moyo or Ki-Moyo or an Nganga or a Sanusi or a Sangoma or a Babalao, etc., a Netiri priest, a Seba in ancient Egyptian, you understand the forces and you have the ability to control them. So those are the Nkole, Nkwele, the Nkole and Ngole, the eminent and powerful men, not just in terms of politics, in terms of the king or a priest, but those who have the ability to understand and use the forces of nature to do harm or good. And so the ideal, of course, is to use these powers for healing, as discussed earlier when it comes to nkisi and medicines. So, but they're also objects. So, of course, nature has objects that house power or forces or spirits, but also statues and things that have been consecrated. In other words, that have been activated. And so Adro is used also to refer to category of objects which are manifestations of divinity and beyond the control and understanding of men. Many apparently miraculous things are called Adro, such as what I have called the guardian spirit of man. And so that your guardian spirit is also Adro, Nature, nkisi, etc., or even matches. The word is sometimes used for testicles and for the power of procreation. Adro lives on earth, especially in rivers. He is also found in large trees and thickets, on high mountains and rocky places. So remember what I said. These objects in nature that are the houses of certain spirits, of certain powers. And so they're in the river, they're in mountains, of course, they're in trees, plants, minerals, and animals. Anything that is conducive to the principle of life and healing is where you find Neter, is where you find Adro, is where you find nkisi, is where you find nkole, nkola, etc. It's where you find Orisha, it's where you find Abosam. Adro is common to all Lugbara. In addition, each clan has its own spirit called Adro. So there's a worldview, there's a spirit, a frame of thought and series of actions, an ancestral lineage, a power that each clan has. This spirit is also a manifestation of God's power, and in many cases is thought of as having been a distant ancestor. So we saw in earlier renditions where Keti or Keta in Angola, in Congo, is referred to a recent dead, an ancestor. And we saw that the word Neter has to deal with ancestors, deified human beings, Orisha, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, all of these things is easy to put together once you know how to decode and use the tool of historical comparative linguistics to make these connections. So now that you've established these connections by means of sound meaning correspondences, regular sound meaning correspondences, now when you read text like this, you can utilize this to answer certain questions in related languages and cultures that are a little bit obscure for us. So remember what I said earlier, or remember what was said earlier by Modupe Oduyoye. And that is, when we talk about Kra or Kla, we can then think of Kra or Kla as consciousness, the part of a man that responds to a calling. That has to deal with the consecration of things, the activation, the empowering. So your voice empowers the other spirits, and then again, you tell it what to do. And so there's another variation of the word Neter, of nkisi, nkita, nkila, etc., and adro, and toro, and intoro, and troro, etc., etc., inkera, and that is won or wo. In the Ga language, the same one that has ka, also has a doublet in the language won or wo. And it is cognate with Middle Egyptian Iwin, which is an epithet in relationship to Osiris. And in the Yoruba language, it's Iwin, ancestors, ghosts, spirits. In the Ingas language, it's Won, ancestors, the living dead, shades, or spirits, nature spirits. That's what the shade is. You know, the shadow of everything is doublet. And then in Bachama, a Nigerian language, is Won, the demigod in charge of the dead, the demigod in charge of the kingdom of death. That is Osiris. And so Osiris lives among the Bachama as Won. And so when we want to understand the nature of Neter, I find this definition to be the most definitive and catch-all for all of what we just said and did earlier. And so notice the title of the book that I'm citing from, Religion and Medicine of the God People. So a wo, by God definition, and the God live in Ghana, is anything that can work but not be seen. Why do I have that highlighted in bold and in red? A wo, which is a womb or ancestors or spirit, is anything that can work. That means, remember what we saw with work, is the energy that comes from a root meaning to do, to act. anything that can do, act, create, express, etc., but not be seen. It is beyond our normal experience. It is the power, the agent that is responsible for the activities of life and objects in reality, and includes smaller beings of specialized and limited activity associated with what? Medicines and magic. Magic being the words of power, the ability to command in real life. And so this is something that is very, very powerful. And to prove that the word won in Middle Egyptian and win is a dialectical variant of the word necher in nkisi, of course, I don't make claims without being able to demonstrate. So Ciluba handles everything once again. So we already established that in Ciluba, the KL consonant sequence corresponds to Egyptian ch-r, or the TR. And so now we see that that same consonant sequence, KL, also corresponds with WN in Egyptian. Let's prove it. So we have desert hair. And then we have kalulu, rabbit. And then we have kanuna, to open. And then we have win, to open in Cikam. And so the L becomes N because of the N that it has a suffix here, and it is regret or progressive assimilation of the L sound. And so we have win, to exist, to become, the essence, in other words, the spirit of a thing. And then we have in Ciluba, bukadi, essence, to be. When the L sound is followed by I, it becomes D in Ciluba. So the root is ikala, to be. Win-win, to move to and fro. In Ciluba is jikula, remove, to move away. Winnet, fortress. In Ciluba, bikole, bikola, strong, very strongly, with strength. How is this related? This, in Egyptian, this T suffix nominalizes a verb, and this word win comes from an archaic verb that means to be strong and to be firm. And so this W is actually an allophone of M as in Mary. And so you'll see that the dialectical variant is MN in Cikam. And so that is discussed in Aaluja Volume 2, as well as towards a comparative dictionary of Cikam and modern African languages. And so it is that root meaning strong, firm, and fixed that gives us, when it's prefixed by the instrument, E, prefix, the word for a god or pillar, an epithet for Osiris. And in Kole, in Kwele, God, by Kole, spirits, ghost. Because remember that spirits has to deal with power, force, energy. Those agents that have the power, strength, and energy to make things happen. And so Iwin is also pillar and column. And then Jikunyi, column, stake, and Kikongo is Mukulu, pole. And that same root for strength, power, whatnot, becomes words for mountain. And so it's Mukuna in Ciluba. And Jileke, pole, which is the inverse in this instance. And so we see that the K corresponds to the W, and that the N corresponds to L in the second consonant position in Ciluba, and in this one example in Kikongo. So that's why we can go here and with strength argue that God Wo, ancestor spirit, is cognate with nature, because the principle in mathematics of transitivity, if A equals B and B equals C, A therefore equals C. So if Egyptian Neter equals Ciluba in Kole, and Ciluba in Kole, for example, equals Egyptian Won, then Egyptian Neter equals Egyptian Won, because we've established the equivalency. And we can do the same thing. We can substitute it with nkisi in any one of those things. And so that's why we do the sound meaning correspondences. And so in conclusion here, the same understandings that we have for nature, we have for nkisi. And so the word nkisi derives from a root meaning to act or to do. When nominalized means power, strength, energy. When prefixed with the agent morpheme, it means one with the ability to act, to do, a prominent or eminent man, god, or spirit. Often refers to a type of spirit that responds to a calling. Thus, objects and medicines can be activated by words of power, which in Middle Egyptian is hekeru, and which in Ciluba is akula, speech, voice, things, etc., etc. And so that pretty much concludes this aspect of the lecture. And actually, what I want to do, I want to give an example of this particular principle. And let me stop sharing this screen. And let's see if I can share. I'm going to, let me put that up for a moment. And I'm going to try to find a video. I'm going to see if it'll allow me to play it. Let me see. What was that video called? You know, Baba Lowell in Atlanta. And you'll see in action what it means to, and I think it's in part 2 of, and so this is, you know, King Bolu. And let me, hopefully it is still live and going on here. Oh, I hope it did not. I hope it did not pause. So let me do this, because I don't know if that thing, I apologize, because this on the phone, the screen has frozen, but I'm not sure that, and I can't get it off. So I don't know if I'm still going. It's still recording, but I don't know if it is actually recording. So I'm going to switch to this other computer, and we will, so hopefully it's a beat. So give me 1 second. Okay, so hopefully it wasn't too bad of an echo. But I'm gonna see if I can find real quick, and I'm gonna share. Hold on one second.
And sometimes we do the elbow sacrifice. Thank you. And also,
hold on. So this is
right here.
Okay. So I'm going to show you in this video that I'm going to share. I'm going to share my screen now. And we're going to see this Babalawo do, he's being interviewed. This is Chief Bolu Fatumisi, right? And this Babalawo, oh, let me take that off. And let me make that full screen. So this is Chief Bolu Fatumisi. He's a Babalawo out of Ile-Ife. And what he's going to do is demonstrate what we mean by, you know, putting medicines and things in an object and being able to command it to do what you want it to do. And so you can take this as, you know, you can believe it or not, but I'm showing this to show the point of what I mean. And so when you see what he is doing in Europe, he's actually in Atlanta, but he's from Yoruba land. So this Babalawo in the Yoruba tradition is doing what they're talking about in regards to nkisi, neter, won, etc. in these other wisdom traditions in Central, West, and of course, Northeast Africa. And so I will increase the, there we go. So hopefully you'll see more of it. So hopefully you can hear this. And so he's going to talk about, you know, the kind of powers that the Babalawo has. And so we'll listen here.
It's like if I was a lone ranger, nobody like me, and I did what I did for you, what am I going to tell the other people? It's about from miracle. Thank you. And also, if I do this, and I invoke this into this, and I said into this to rise up, we call it miracle. See, African people get power. Oh, of course, African people get power. But when we do our own power, we call it black magic. If it's a white man, we call it genius. It's a shame. Because God give everybody their power. Okay? Now, if I invoke this now, it will rise up. It will be sitting down my hand like this. But if I invoke it, it will rise up. I shall never be doing that. Okay, Mama. See? So you invoke it and tell him to go and sit down. You can see the way it goes. Wow. So the more you see, the more you know. If you don't search, you don't go places, you don't know.
So I hope y'all were able to see what, you know, he did. And so if you notice that he had this little almost doll-like calabash thing, it has some medicine and some herbs in it. It has spirits, because spirits are physical objects that have a certain energy, that have a certain potency or ability to do things. And when he started speaking in the sacred language to it, he had it laying down on his hand, and then it just rose up vertically. He told it to stand up, to sit up vertically. And this is what it means to activate. It is, It is a spirit. It is a God that responds to a calling. So when you see that, everything that we're learning in terms of the linguistics, in terms of the academic, recording of these concepts makes more sense. So when you talk about nkisi, when you talk about nketa, nkera, neteru, won, that's what we're talking about. And you would do that with medicine. So if you're taking these herbs, if you're taking these plants, things, etc., it's not enough to just consume it. You have to tell the medicine what to do. And so when it does, it rises up in you and it does what it's supposed to do. And that's where the healing, comes from in terms of its potency. So with that said, I end this conversation and I look forward to your feedback. I'll stop the sharing right there. And so make sure that you contact me if you have any questions on my social media pages, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or on YouTube. So with that, y'all have a blessed day. And I hope your president that you chose gets picked. If you didn't vote, then oh well, you didn't vote. So I'm not going to shame you. But again, y'all have a blessed week. And if y'all have any questions, just hit me up. Like and share and support the channel. So you can leave something in the Cash App, or you can give a donation on the website, asarmhotep.com, or you can join the Patreon at patreon.com/asarmhotep. So with that, I'm out. Peace.